I'm going to sign in as the right identity. Okay. Did it kick in, Sarah?
I think so. The YouTube page hasn't loaded for me, but it's
Yeah, I understand.
the-
There's one more thing I can do. Sorry
the-
about this, everybody.
I think it's working. I can see the YouTube
Okay, then.
link.
Let the meeting begin. Welcome to the April 21st Chapter Leaders Meeting. I'm John Shullen, Rochester, New York, co-founder of e-NABLE, and we have a number of people who I haven't met yet, so this is very exciting. We have these chapter leaders meetings roughly once a month. We may be changing the schedule of them. And I do remember that I urged Anquan and Galib, who is from Virginia Tech, is it? To both show up. So that's great. And Gavin, you are here with?
I'm also here with Virginia Tech.
Excellent. Jonathan is a regular here at e-NABLE. Nice to see you. Rohit, if I remember, is also a Virginia Techer.
Yep.
And Trisha?
I'm also here with VT.
All right. So well done. And Anquan is currently doing a very exciting project in coordination with Uganda. And he's from, is it fair to call it e-NABLE Sarasota? Are you an official chapter now?
We're at NorCal e-NABLE and Northern California. Yeah. So
okay.
We're in Saratoga though. Yeah.
Great. And I have to say, I had inspiring meetings with both of you in the last 6 weeks or so. I think both groups are doing great work. I wanted to give you a chance to talk to each other, and then all of us talk about what's coming next. I think Anquan has been on my radar longer than Virginia Tech, so I'm going to let him give a little bit of context about what he's been doing. Or have you two already been in touch with each other?
We met last weekend, is that right? Something like that, Galib?
So Anquan, why don't you, for my benefit and for the millions of people watching this video, give us an overview of where these discussions stand?
Sure. We've been doing an e-NABLE here and there for the last few years. I'm part of Saratoga High School in Northern California. I'm one of their coaches for their high school robotics team called the MSET Cuttlefish, as well as three other teams there. We actually just got back from World Championships yesterday, but yeah. We did pretty well, I think. We didn't win, but you're also competing with the top 2.9% of the world, so we actually did quite well. We were in elimination rounds and for our division, and I think we kind of reached the limits of our design. I think we did quite well. But outside of that, so we do quite a bit of work outside of just e-NABLE. We do national and state advocacy work for increasing STEM funding for after-school programs. We try to increase gender equity in STEM. So we do a lot of things. e-NABLE is one of our bigger projects, though, or one of our larger projects as well. Previously, it was more of a hobby. We just had a couple students doing it, 3-4 hands a year. Just like e-NABLE is, you send it to the Philippines or Mexico or Brazil, things like that. And we got in touch with somebody from e-NABLE Winnipeg, and he was very enthusiastic about helping the World Action Fund in Uganda, which is an NGO out there. And they do a lot of things, but their main focus is disability in Uganda. And they got very interested in the use of prosthetics, and they were working with a different type of prosthetic at the time that's 3D printed, but Peter Odama, the head of the organization, was very unsatisfied, and they kind of started, I think, understanding what e-NABLE was in 2024. In any event, we connected through Peter through the e-NABLE Winnipeg, and we started to understand the scope of his problem. He submitted a spreadsheet of at least 300 or 400 people who would need hands, which later grew to 700 to 800. And he also sent us a spreadsheet of his funding needs to support that particular project, not just World Action Fund, but just that particular project. And that it includes, hiring. This is not a volunteer organization. They actually hire people to do these things. So driving out 200 kilometers to make measurements, prosthetists and things like that, and not just driving to make measurements. Then you have to go drive back and do it, and actually put it on the patient and see if it works. And so there's a lot of logistic issues, and I kind of watched how it seemed like they were organizing people to assemble hands. They had kinetic hands, but it wasn't, in my mind, occurring at the clip that it needed to. If you were going to have scalability issues with what was going on, and that it was essentially, I think it had gone beyond the typical e-NABLE structure of you need a hand, I'll make a hand. You need a hand, I'll make a hand. And that kind of needed just a hair more logistics than it was able to support. So my students and I decided that we were just going to give it a name, because sometimes names have power. Like Virginia Tech, you don't just say I conglomerated in Virginia and everybody studies engineering. You actually have to have an organization that teaches people and says, hey, we want to be a great engineering school. We want to make great engineers. We're going to call ourselves this powerful name like Virginia Tech. So we just called it it's very high and mighty, the Uganda e-NABLE Coalition. And so we did that. And initially it was just a few students. I told the students, I try to match their desires with what they were capable of doing. So we have a students whose his sole responsibility is QA. So everybody who makes an e-NABLE hand must submit photographs. He will review them, make sure that it's sturdy and able to kind of work, and then also good for transport, because we've already had a few issues, as you know, John, of people sending like a kinetic hand or something and it arrives damaged or broken. Our second issue, of course, was deciding how do we distribute the hands and keep people accountable. So Galib, you're going to find, as you have found with your current organization, that you will give somebody a job or a duty to do, and life intrudes, and that job never happens. And that's true in adult world as well as it is in student world. So we try to hold people accountable, and then we just say, hey, you know what? I guess you're busy. It's been 2 weeks, and you haven't meaningfully progressed on your project. Let's move on. Have someone else do it, and you can start up again when you're free. And then you just do it in a very gracious way. You don't want to burn bridges and say, hey, you're a jerk. You don't know what you're doing. So they just may be very busy. So we have one student who's literally her and that's Florence and a little bit of Lucius as well. They check the spreadsheet of everybody signed up for hand. And then they check where they are in the process. Are they currently doing the measurements? Are they currently 3D printing? Are they currently assembling? Are they currently shipping? Where are they in the process? And then she checks the spreadsheet to make sure, fairly regularly, and says, hey, you know what? This person hasn't progressed to even the 3D printing phase in the last 2 weeks. Then we kind of reassess whether maybe that goes to somebody else, and you can always start up again when you become free. And I think the other problem is most of these are volunteer. Everybody's a volunteer, so people kind of get to it when they can. So that's kind of the second phase. The third phase is R&D, which I think is kind of interesting because there's a bunch of high school students. But the great thing about a bunch of high school students is they are purpose-built at this point to building competition robots. So this is almost nothing for them. I shouldn't say that. Prosthetic hand development is very complicated, but what was interesting, and John and I have had long discussions about it, I could not conceive of how the kinetic hand, which is gorgeous, or even the Phoenix Unlimited hand, which is, I think, more robot looking and therefore cool for some people in the US, I could not conceive of how we would scale it. I talked to my kids, how long does it take to make a Phoenix Unlimited hand, assuming everything's printed? And they would tell me, oh, 2 to 4 hours, something like that. And so I looked at the spreadsheet and I found that wasn't really true. It wasn't really 2 to 4 hours, because really, who has 2 to 4 hours just to sit there and build a hand? So it ended up being a 2 to 4 hour thing for some people who are busy, ended up 2 to 4 weeks. And then some part would break and they would redo it. And same thing with the kinetic hand. It's a gorgeous hand, or the flexi hand too, gorgeous hands. There's a lot of TPU parts to print, and there's a lot of kind of individual digits and joints that have to come together. So there was that. I didn't know how you could scale a thing like that. I mean, if you think about it, let's say it takes on average 2 weeks, which is more than that, for one person to make a kinetic hand. Okay. Let's be more realistic, but like 2 to 4 weeks. So, and we have 300 hands. Well, whatever 300, let's say 360 hands make the math simpler. Now you have 30 months. So, I don't know how you're going to scale it. How many volunteers would you need to do that? And so Peter also was not happy with the way the hands were not, they kind of stood out aesthetically. The kinetic hand looked gorgeous, but some of the other hands looked too much like robots, and they didn't like that. The people over there were finding the aesthetics are not as good as they could be. And the third problem was because, well, Peter, I watched the documentary that you had, and a lot of people in the US love having this hand that looks like Iron Man. And they love this hand that looks like the Hulk. We actually had a kid who said, "Can you make a green like the Hulk?" Right? But in Uganda, they didn't want to stand out like in any way, shape, or fashion. They don't want people to know that they have a disability, at least obviously. So John had pointed us to the gripper hand. Now the gripper hand, we didn't see what it was attached to, so we went ahead and attached it to Kwawu. We modified the CAD. We also modified the thumb of the CAD so that it could accept a silicon mold. And then we made the whole thing available for an SCAD. So all you have to do is enter in the person's particular measurements for each segment of the hand. It'll render the whole thing, including the silicone mold for the thumb, and everything kind of I think on the Mac it's like 20 minutes. Go ahead, John.
This would be a great moment if you have it, and if you don't, I can find it, to just give
Mhm.
people a look at the
Oh yeah,
Huawei Ripper that you have produced.
yeah. Let me pull
Because
up
I think
the
it's a real
slideshow.
advance, and I think people should get a look at it.
For sure, for sure. Let me make sure I don't have other windows open. And okay. Let me share my screen.
Hmm.
Oh, I'm just gonna request screen sharing if that's okay.
I think so.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. I don't know if y'all can see that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me pull it up. These are all the different things that we do, but let me just pull up enable. There it is. It's just the top one.
Enable is top left. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
We're not
So
getting
all
the full
14.
slideshow, but that's okay.
Can you see?
We see what you see. We see the
Okay. Okay.
the slides
So
with the thumbnails.
today we have 51 shipped and 47 in production. And we'd only just started, I think, in November, but we started really in earnest in January. We talked about 45 the hands in production, our QA process, research and
Sorry,
development process.
I'm
Can you
sorry.
hear me at all?
We're not looking at the same screen. I see your Google Slides editing screen,
Oh, really? Oh, let's see here. I wonder why it
which is
doesn't
okay
just.
if you want to work there.
I think that's fine too. Okay. Can you see research and development?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we talked about the problems with grip strength, with aesthetics. You can see here the social sigma. Peter had talked about that. John Scholl had recommended the gripper. And so we went ahead and you can see there's even veins on this hand as opposed to the unlimited hand. So it was very pretty. The other problems we noticed that most of the other hands have an inadequate grip strength. This is actually the bottle for the silicone mold that we made. And you can see the white bit on the bottom here of the thumb. That's actually a silicone that's been molded onto the thumb itself. So what we did was we shaved about a millimeter off of the 3D printed prosthetic thumb, and you just place it in the mold and pour the silicone in. So the silicone is just something you get on Amazon. It's something they use to make prosthetics for makeup artists. So it's actually fairly inexpensive. We adapted this to be used with the Kwawu forearm. And initially, you can see here, we actually created a 3D printed screw that you could just screw it on. But then we realized that that was probably less practical than just making, this is actually an older version of what we made. We just decided to go ahead and make just a square peg that fits into a square hole, and then we epoxy it together. Um, there are other kind of problems here. You can see extended use. Our concern with any of the very gorgeous or even interesting arms is that they're stringing. I wonder if they snap. All those little pieces you see where the fingertips is, any one of those can break easily. In fact, we had a person ship a kinetic hand, and the kinetic hand, the fingers had shattered upon arrival despite the use of bubble wrap. Um, we also worry about assembly time, as I talked about, scalability for production. Some of these, including the Phoenix Unlimited, require actually a very large printer bed. And then difficulty of repair. What happens when it breaks off-site? And then who repairs it? And you could say, well, the World Action Fund can repair it if we can teach them. But the problem is sometimes these patients are 200 kilometers away. The advantage of our current modification is there's really only one or two moving parts. If you see here, you can see that there's just one thumb. So from an engineering perspective, it's almost too simple. Most of the people who are hobbyists like to make something very cool.
That's
And
right.
this one is, and this is really just a very strong rubber band called a castration band that just does this, right? It's so simple that you think, well, I don't want to make something that simple. I want to make something cool. So at the end of the day, I can show my friends, like, hey, look at this cool thing that I made. But we're not in the business of making the Lego Death Star. We're we're into the business of trying to give people something they might need. So what's interesting is just pull over here. We've actually made it a little bit easier to do things like grip a motorcycle thing. We made it easier to grip a broom handle or a hoe. We found out the grip was inappropriate for that because it didn't grip tightly enough. So because once you reach a smaller diameter, the spring force is less, if that makes sense. So we said, why don't we just take a styrofoam pool noodle, cut it, and then just fit it over the broom or hoe, and then your grip will be better. And we found that that's actually true. Um, Here you can see we're gripping a Sharpie specifically just to write. Um, Now, John, we're finding with smaller diameter pens, the grip is actually a little bit less. So we're kind of trying to decide, like this is a Sharpie and we thought it was fine, but with pens, it's actually a little bit more difficult. So we're trying to find solutions behind that. A rubber band works well to make a grip a pen more easily. So we're not sure if it's an actual design change or just a very small, like if you put the rubber band in this way, it'll work better. So the WF team, they were very happy. They thought we were driving innovation and design, but they have a lot of problems because they have limited resource constraints. And initially, they had commented they had a $34,000 budget. I think it ballooned up to 60 or 70 recently. And our organization, we're used to fundraising for robots, but fundraising for an NGO that's not even in this country is actually not as easy as you might think. A lot of organizations want to make sure you're affiliated with US. And so we've worked over the last 3-4 months. We've raised about $18,000 through private donors, corporate matching, a little bit of journalism, local school newspaper, fundraising dinners, things like that. And we're still working on it, despite again these are all high school students really doing this work. So we've been able to work with a lot of people. The fun thing is we've been able to meet a lot of just really interesting. We talked to Skip Meets, who actually designed the original gripper. We've talked to people who work in Tanzania, who was talking, Eamon O'Brien, who's doing some amazing assistive tech work in Tanzania. And he's been giving us some advice about how we could get grant money and things like that, because he formed his own NGO in Tanzania doing assistive tech. He modifies wheelchairs for use in Tanzania. And in fact, he says the great thing is if the wheelchair that he created, the team creates, not him, but the team creates, breaks, they can just use old bicycle parts to repair it.
Yes.
So he actually, interestingly, and no slide on anybody in the call, he was extremely, extremely skeptical of e-NABLE. Well, not because of anything other than he said, he's just seen so many people try to make things for African countries that were just not
Mm.
useful to the people on the ground. And so I think he was more willing to look at what we had to do as long as it was working in another country that was African. And so I said, you know what, we're going to come back. We're going to come back. Let's see what we can do with World Action Fund. So we're going to talk to Eamon again at some point, but he was very useful to talk to.
That's great.
I was joking with the students. You guys have now made a hand that's so easy a fifth grader can make it, and we've now done that. Morris Elementary School, Rockaway Valley School, they've turned into a fourth and fifth grade class project where the students of 3 or 4 will research the patient that is being given to. And the teacher herself is actually an engineer. She'll do all the SCAD, print it up, students assemble, and then they ship. So it's it's actually is about to be or has been featured in the Texarkana Gazette, which I recommended. And she asked me why we were doing that. And I said, it's not for us. It's honestly just to increase the visibility of your school, and you maybe be able to get more funding that way. So they just got funded for another 3D printer, so that was really
Oh,
good.
cool.
Yeah. So anyhow, so that's been our journey so far. I hope I didn't take up too much of your time. It's been very impactful for the students. They've been very, I think, moved by some of the stories of the people out there. We have a guy named, one of our first guys, actually, let me just share this very cute story. He is Anthony Iochironi, and I know I'm mispronouncing it, so I apologize. This is one of our early cases. And he's a 31-year-old farmer supporting his family. And one day he was attacked by armed robbers. He lost his personal possessions, but he lost his left arm. And when I lost my hand, I thought my life was over. I couldn't farm. I couldn't work. I felt useless. I mean, he had to get his neighbors to help him for every little thing.
Mhm.
When he met with the World Action Fund and they did fitments, he initially was skeptical, but started to feel a glimmer of hope. And he said, "This arm is not just plastic and metal; it's freedom. I can feed my
Mm.
animals. I can write my name. I can work again." And I never thought this would be possible. And this was one of our early ones. Just you can see it's just the Phoenix Unlimited. It's not even the
Right.
best version
Right.
of what we can make. Poor group strength. And he couldn't do all of his farming that he normally could, but he actually pivoted to beekeeping. And now he has a very successful, thriving beekeeping business, making honey and selling it. So it's pretty inspiring. So I actually think, the things that we're doing, they're so minimal in comparison to what's helpful to the person you're developing for. Like the 3D printing time is probably just under 24 hours. Yeah. And the Quavo gripper assembly time, as opposed to the other types of arms, is probably 20 minutes ish. And the epoxy time is about a day, probably less. So for essentially 2.5 days of work, you've changed this person's whole life. Is it the coolest thing you could possibly make? Probably not. I mean, there's these cool bioelectric, they use like myoelectric sensors to like grip and all that. And somebody asked me about that. I'm like, well, I don't think I'm going to buy like a $20,000 arm for 600 people. If you have that kind of funding, great. More power to you. And I would love it. But if we're just talking about something practical, down and dirty, someone can use today to like while we're waiting for $10 million in funding. Um, I think it can really help somebody. And these are kind of the stories that we look for. It's what I
Yes.
try to help keep my students engaged. My student actually literally said each arm changes a life. And so we're pretty happy with the enable work so far.
It, it, I'm pretty happy with your work so far.
Thank you.
Also, I think it's, all of the problems you've identified and are 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 right. And even Eamon's critique is entirely valid. We've
Right.
wrestled with these challenges, and yet, the Enable enterprise has been useful even with all of those deficiencies. But you have, for the first time, I think, really inspired a group of geeks to focus on what really matters, namely, can we help people and make it still inspiring and useful? And you have logistic expertise, which frankly, and apparently the willingness and ability to pull it together, which frankly has been a weak point yet. So I want to give the Virginia Tech people a chance to tell their story. But then I want to talk about how we can take what I perceive to be your two groups, which I really see as a next level of e-NABLE competence, to better support them and help spread this methodology around the larger American e-NABLE community, which, as you've been saying, is, a hodgepodge of all sorts of activities, much of which is educational, but has not done nearly what needs to be done in order to actually benefit people in need. And that's not a criticism of, frankly, of anything in the story, but you've opened up an opportunity. So thank you. Well done. Great presentation. Recorded, so we'll be able to make use of it. Galib and Gavin and Trisha and Rohit and Brandon, are you from Virginia Tech also? Okay. I dare you to tell your story as well as told his, or even half as well would be fine.
Yeah, that's gonna be a hard one to top. So I don't actually have a slideshow prepared or anything, but I can
All
share
right.
some pictures. So our Virginia Tech chapter this year, we kind of function in different sub teams. So we have like our leadership board, and then we have 5 different sub teams that all kind of work with different kinds of clients, and then team leads for each of those sub teams, and then like people under them that they'll all kind of get work done across these like 5 different branches that we have. Let me see if I can find a slideshow that I can share.
Sure.
Hold on. Okay, this one should be good. So we've recently here, wait, actually first let me talk about this our different sub teams. Let me share this. Uh-oh. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay, so we have 6 different sub teams. This is pretty funny. This is our every week we have meetings, and then we present about recent updates. So like here's literally like Anquan's like Uganda stuff. We were presenting about that. But basically we have 5 different sub teams, and each one works with different tiers of clients. So of our 5, we have 3 that are kind of more based in CAD, 2 that are based in manufacturing. Actually, this one's not really active anymore. So we have 1 based in manufacturing, and then 1 based in bioelectrics. So let me run through each of those. So the one that I was on last year, I was the lead for our TTAC team. So they work with Virginia Tech's Training and Technical Assistance Center, and basically they're connected with the Southwest region of Virginia. So schools with special needs programs, they all reach out to Virginia Tech requesting different devices. So for example, a common one is like an iPad key guard. I think I have one. I don't have the iPad with me right now, but I have a key guard. Basically this goes onto iPads, and if you guys have ever seen text-to-speech apps, students will click on different buttons on their text-to-speech apps, and that way they can communicate to their teacher if they have some kind of like speaking deficit. For example, it's pretty common in students with autism. About a third of students with autism are considered nonverbal in a classroom. They need some kind of assistive device to be able to speak. So they use a text-to-speech app. But then there's also a decent demographic of students that both can't speak, but they also have motor control inhibitions. For example, in my elementary school, there was this really poor student. He had a really unfortunate car accident, which prevented him both from being able to talk and from being able to speak well. So a device like an iPad key guard, this kind of gives a sort of tactile guide for them to be able to click on the individual buttons that they want. So there was around 5 students last year that have this issue in Southwest Virginia. So last year we made this key guard device out of acrylic. It's both clear, gives a tactile aid, and on the internet, these are about $50 each. We got this cost down to $3, so we're just able to give it out to those 5 students for free. So TTAG, they're working on new projects this semester. I don't have any pictures of those yet, but they're helping one student with cerebral palsy. I think he's 8 years old. Um, and he wants to be able to play, I think it's an Xbox, but he kind of has a hard time. He doesn't have much control of like his individual
Sure.
fingers. He can move his hands, but not the fingers. So our current T-Tag team, they're making 3D printed parts that make the buttons a lot easier to just push. So you can lay the Xbox controller flat and just push on the different buttons that you want so that this kid can play video games without having to move his individual fingers. It's really simple, but by the end of the semester, we hope he'll be able to play video games just from having really cheap 3D part attachments to his controller. We have another team called Hypertech. That one's a new team this year. Virginia Tech is pretty closely associated with this place called Carillion Clinic. They're a medical school, and we're connected with different med students there. So they'll kind of give us perspectives on what patients need, and then we're able to make devices based on those patient needs. So, for example, one project that they're working on right now is an eye drop assister because the med students, they told us that sometimes older patients have a hard time using their glaucoma medicine. Oftentimes, glaucoma medicines are ocular, so they need an eye drop to do that. But, I personally have a really hard time getting all the eye drops in, and the glaucoma medicine can be pretty expensive, and especially people who are 50, 60 plus, trying to put that in their eye and then aiming it well, it can be quite difficult. So they're making a sort of eye drop assister to make it a little bit easier for them to be able to drop the individual drops into each of their eyes. They're also making a gun lock right now because this is to help reduce child mortality rates with kids accidentally using firearms. There's a decent rate of that right now. So they're making a really cheap 3D model that's adjustable that can print and then just go straight onto like guns and make it childproof so that a child wouldn't know how to undo it, but then the adult can come in and undo it, and then that way kids don't accidentally use firearms. We have a statics team, so traditionally like this sub team was meant to go on the forum and create devices based on needs in the forum. We found this year that we weren't able to find that many things, so that's why I actually reached out to John Cho about a month or two ago to be able to give this statics team more projects. And if this Uganda coalition thing, they would definitely be able to take on the mantle of doing R&D for Uganda. That would probably be our next goal for the statics team. But for now, they kind of work with our other sub-teams. So for example, they're currently working with our T-Tag team to create the Xbox controller. They're also making a sort of joystick to help this kid be able to play other video games. It's just a lot easier of a joystick to use that you don't have to grip. You can just put your hand on it flat and be able to move it easier. And then we have our Maya team. So basically, this girl's name is Maya. We got connected with her about 2 years ago because one of our professors happened to be speaking with her, and then our professor connected with our program. And since then, we've been making this bike right here that helps her be able to ride with her parents. So it's basically like a custom-made bike where she'd be able to sit on it. They're currently building a sunshade. They're currently building a custom brake system and custom buttons so that she can click on different buttons and be able to communicate with her parents. Oh, sorry, I didn't say, but Maya is both dyspraxic and nonverbal, so she doesn't have much control over her limbs, and she can't communicate as well. So that makes riding a bike really difficult. But having this custom-made bike that had buttons on it for her to be able to say, I want to go home, or stop, or let's keep going. Having her be able to like click on those buttons to be able to communicate with their parents, that make it easier for her to be able to ride with her parents. Sorry, John, did you have a question?
Well, I just want to say is, first of all, you've already met the threshold. It's an excellent presentation. I would love for you to share the slides. So let me summarize why I'm so excited about what you all are doing, rather than have you walk us through each of the wonderful projects you're doing. My summary would be, here you've got a large organization, lots of people. You've managed to connect to people in need, and you're going way beyond prosthetics. And you mentioned that I want you to tell us more about this May design sprint, which flashed across your screen. and you're coordinating with Anquan's group. What I'd really like to focus on for now is not just celebrating what your groups are doing, but about how you are or should be coordinating with other chapters and how you are or could take better advantage of the e-NABLE community. All right, that's sort of from my point of view, the big opportunity here. So the design sprint that you flashed looked pretty interesting. Why don't you just mention that so we know what that was?
Oh, well, our club at the end of the semester is going to have a design expo. So basically, each of our 5 sub teams will be in stations around kind of a lecture hall, and then they'll be presenting to different faculty and our different partners. For example, the Carillion Clinic, our T-Tech department that is discussed. We're inviting all those partners, and then also students who'd be interested in joining our club next year, so that they all can go around, give feedback.
All right. So when you say send out email to the e-NABLE email list, you mean your own Virginia
Yeah,
Tech?
Virginia Tech. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay. Can you just let us glimpse the remaining slides in your in the presentation you claimed not to have?
Well, I mean, this is just our like weekly meeting. I mean, we have a new leadership board,
Got it.
and then this was recapping the meeting that we had with Anquan last week, where he showed the
Okay.
same thing in this meeting.
All right. So in a minute, I'd like you to talk to me a little bit more about how your two groups are coordinating. But let's just step through your last slides. Or have we?
Well, that's pretty much it.
Good.
And then yeah, these pictures are from 2 weeks ago. We participated in the National Conference of Undergraduate Research. It was great. Like all of our 4 of our sub teams went and participated, showed off the different projects. People loved e-NABLE because we had like practical projects to show. But yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm being a little bit heavy-handed here, but this is the first time I've had the 2 of your groups come together. And yet you have also already begun coordinating. So what I want to figure out is what, if anything, I or the larger e-NABLE should do in order to support and amplify the directions you are each taking the initiative on. Because you each within your own chapters are addressing what have emerged over the years as the fundamental limitations of e-NABLE in America as it now is. So just tell me about how you're working together and how we can build on what you're doing without, by the way, burdening you with things that you're not prepared to take on yet.
Hmm.
I'm gonna modify what you suggested, John. I
Good.
don't want to say it's a limitation of an enable. I guess I know what you mean, and I kind of did say that too. I guess I'm not. Maybe I shouldn't. I would say that enable, from what I can see, and I think you've talked, it started out as a way of hobbyists who have a social desire to help people with people who need that help. And that it's a very organic thing. And I think organic wrestlers things are honestly where things start out. The largest movements have started out that way. And so I think Enable has kind of met what it set out to do. I don't know if that makes sense. Um, and the kind of the next step, and I think our group is very satisfied with that. We were satisfied with that. Robotic students are geeky students who like to build and create things, and then connected with somewhere they can do a little bit of good, which we're always looking for. And Galib's group of the Virginia Tech group, you guys are clearly doing that at a higher level. But then when you start to see a larger need, that's when
Mhm.
enable itself, at least as it exists, the form itself is not yet prepared to deal with a thing like that because that requires coordination, logistics, making sure. I mean, that perfect example is he's already Peter literally told me a few months ago after having known me for like 2 weeks. He said, "Okay, everything goes through you, Quan." I said, "Wait." You just met me like 3 weeks ago. And mostly because, he would receive, they said, hey, you know what, maybe don't send me any more kinetic hands. I like this new thing. And he said, just talk to Quan. And so from his perspective, it's nice to have a lot of people want to help you, but if you're living on the other side of the world and do you really want 50 people, different people to send you 50 different hands and you're not even sure who made it and all those kind of things. So it centralizes what was previously by design decentralized. And I think that's kind of what needs to happen for specific things. I guess if that makes sense. If you're
It
talking
makes
about one
it,
season,
it makes perfect sense. But let me also point out that
yeah,
I'm excited about it because if you can act as that centralized hub and portal to Uganda, giving
right.
Peter just a single source of support, but giving
Yeah.
e-NABLE volunteers around the country a channel for doing their work
Yeah,
and
so that's
for
what.
seeing these
Mhm,
devices actually doing good. It
mhm.
will address a real fundamental problem. They can remain distributed if
Yeah.
there's a funnel that will capture, quality check, and ship their
And
products.
yep, that's what we've been trying to do. So we've been trying to keep the spirit of Enable live, like individual contributors, but through it, like you said, a central channel, like somewhere where some people who are willing to kind of look and see what you did and just say, hey, you know what, all of community, we had a design change. Everybody start making this instead. And so that's what we've
Right.
kind of been trying to do. Like, and keep in mind, these are all students who are all very high level and trying to take AP tests next week, compete for world
Yeah, well, it's a high
championships,
school
and
students.
they're I'm trying to make them do crazy things, and it's to their credit, all Mr. Nguyen has to do is say, hey, let's take over the functional needs of the entire nation of Uganda. What do you guys think, 14 high school students? Do you think we can do it?
And they say yes. That's right. They don't know that it's hard, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, it's really good. But again, we can't do it by ourselves. Like I said, Morris Elementary School and some of these other places that really have and then you also have these onesies and twosies of peoples who come in and say, hey, I'd love to contribute. How can I contribute? I had one guy who reached out to me, can I go to Uganda with you guys? I'm like, I've never set foot, but if you'd like to go, you're more than welcome. So
Interesting.
so I think and then I had a very inspiring talk with Galib last week and the rest of the Virginia Tech crew. A few weeks ago, we had talked to Gaza, a group, not Gaza, I didn't talk to Gaza. I talked to a group in Toronto who has been redesigning and designing the FlexiHand 2. They're engineers, they're not college students. Some of them are college students, that's not right. And they were working on the FlexiHand 2. And after talking with us, they realized that the people in Gaza had the same issues that the people in Uganda. They didn't want something that was going to stand out. They actually
And
even
they want
said,
something robust.
I want a hand, even if it's non-functional, just to keep me from standing out. Right. And they were taking the flexi hand too, and they were actually going the opposite direction. They're trying to give it more and more interesting engineering functionality and attachments for holding a pen. And they looked at my thing, and it was I shouldn't say my thing, our thing. And it was just this complete turnaround. So they're kind of looking into how they can modify what we have to what they need. And so it's been very interesting to working with this community. And the great thing is when you work with other groups, you suddenly don't have to do that work. You can just, hey, what do you think about this? And then they can help you with that. And they've even they were asking because they have quite a bit of work on grief counseling and trauma and things like that. And they were wondering if they could send
Hmm.
us material to help with the Ugandans who I want to say all of them, but a lot of them have lost their limbs through violence. There's extremist groups like the Lord's Resistance Army and some of these other things, armed robbers, things like that. And so a lot of those patients need grief counseling. So were wanting to send us materials. On the other hand, and this is just John, you're a connector, and I don't see myself as a connector, but I don't know through this enable work somehow I'm becoming one unintentionally. But I'm talking to them, and I said, oh, it's interesting you're for Gaza. I know somebody who has shipped medical equipment over there, specifically through her network. So now they're interested in my network, which I didn't even think I really had,
Yeah, absolutely.
of how
You
they
know,
shipped equipment over
I
there.
know some Israeli groups that would like to support what you're
Yeah,
doing in Gaza, and they actually need a go-between just because it's
yeah.
such a sensitive issue.
It is very sensitive, and I don't want to introduce politics into it. I don't want to say
Yeah,
wherever you sit on the issue, I'm a doctor, but actually, I'm actually a doctor, and to me, a patient is a patient, a person is a person. Person needs a limb, they need a limb. If you're having a heart attack, I don't care what your political views are. I come at 2 a.m. in the morning to fix you. I don't even know who you are.
Quan, did you just reveal that you are, in fact, a doctor?
Yeah, I guess I didn't say that. I'm an interventional cardiologist. I work
I
here in
remember
Northern
that now.
California. Yeah, I work
Okay.
here in Northern California. I'm the on top of being an interventional cardiologist and coaching high school robotics. I'm also the medical director for cardiology. I supervise like 60 cardiologists throughout the Bay Area.
Oh, and are you one of these people who doesn't sleep?
Um, I might sleep a little less than the average person.
Okay.
But and I was telling somebody else this. I say I honestly can't do most of the things that I do and be like a micromanager. I don't know how people
Mhm.
do that. I what I try to do is I try to what you do, John, and I'm sure the people in Virginia Tech. The goal is eventually to figure out the abilities of the people you're working with and how to maximize that.
Of course.
Right. I'm not gonna get the kid who's the geeky kid who likes to tinker and put him on the person project management lead of UAC and checking the lists. I'm gonna put him on R&D, right?
That's right.
Like so you get it and so like honestly, yes, I'm the lead for the Uganda Enable Coalition, but I really rely on my students to do the day-to-day emailing. They check the
Absolutely.
form all the time. They put all the stuff, they put everything on GitHub and all of the things that they need to. So I think finding a good team, training them, and then trusting them, but then
Okay.
meeting with them frequently to make sure that they're meeting their goals. Part of the robotics team, we teach them project management, we teach them leadership and things like that. So it's interesting what the stuff they do to make a robot is the same stuff they do to figure out how to help Oakland Union School District build a robotics program, how to create Yoga Enable Coalition. It's project management is a fungible activity. It's the same stuff I used. I developed a program for the Bay Area where I essentially saved the organization. I'm gonna go through it like $2 to $3 million just through better organization. So
Okay. So
project
let's,
management, yeah, I don't want to get into it. Sorry.
well, with your permission, I'd like both of you to, well, we could wait a month
Hmm.
for this conversation to continue, or we could meet
Right.
sooner, which I think we should. Um, but we'll circle back to that in a moment.
Hmm.
Um, so so what you just said about project management and about all of this
Hmm.
and about your own background now explains to me how your group and the group at Virginia Tech
Hmm.
is doing the miraculous things you are both doing.
Hmm.
You both you've gone through a process of professional training and logistics management. And may I add, unlike most of the medical professionals I've met and most of the engineers I've met, you're actually focused not just on doing cool tech, but actually figuring out how to get solutions into the hands of people where they need them.
Yeah.
So, from my point of view, I mean, I'm certainly here to connect and cheer you on, and I appreciate what you're saying, but I want you to understand that you're beyond my expertise, and I'm getting grayer and grayer, so I want to just figure out um how to empower you guys to take this forward in what is, whether you recognize it or not, a new plateau of functionality for e-NABLE.
Right.
And for me, the question is, on the one hand, you guys are doing fantastic jobs of strengthening what you are doing in your individual locations. I happen to notice, though, that you're also doing something that could become an infrastructure for amplifying what you're doing using the larger e-NABLE community.
Hmm.
And rather than speculate about how that's going to happen, I want to see whether you consider that an exciting prospect or a burden that will slow you down in what you really want to do. Because I don't want to slow you down. Um,
Hmm.
And then when we've got the answer to that, we can, I want you to begin speculating about how we can either just support your individual efforts, which are spectacular, or support an attempt at integration and amplification. Did that make sense?
Yeah, I
I've
hear
sort
what
of
you're
got
saying,
it.
actually.
There are two decisions that have to be made, right? I've
Mhm.
just, I claim to have reviewed and validated what you're doing in your respective locations. I either want to just pat you on the back or say, how can I help? Or I want to pat you harder on the back and shove you forward and say, how can you lead? You get to choose.
It's not necessarily more of a burden if you have a good team. I don't know if that makes sense. Right. It's
Yep,
more of a burden if you're doing everything yourself. So people, you're not the first person to ask me if I sleep. Uh, I do have my own hobbies. I do my own things. So, but it's not actually physically possible to do without a team.
of course.
Honestly. So certainly, I hear what you're asking. Let me reiterate what I think I'm hearing. So on the one hand, we can say, you know what, Virginia Tech, amazing job, good work, keep what you're doing. What can we do to support, help you do your thing? Uganda Enable Coalition, what can we do to help? Blah blah blah, this and that. Um, and Uganda Enable Coalition, I'm hoping once we've kind of understood Peter's issues and World Action Fund's issues, how can we? My eventual goal, I was telling the team, is not to actually produce hands for them ad infinitum. My goal for them is to send them 3D printers, filament, shipping costs are now gone. And if they can't figure out the SCAD piece, we SCAD for them because that's not hard. And having it on site makes much more sense than having thousands of volunteers, hundreds scores, whatever, sending things over. We can still do that, but it doesn't make sense in the long run to do that forever. It makes more sense to us to, well, like the whole statement, if you give a man a fish,
Yeah,
he eats
sure.
for a day, you teach a man to fish and he eats for a lifetime. And so that our eventual goal is to do something like that. But I don't want to do that until we've essentially dialed in the exact designs that will
Exactly.
carry on. And then sending filament and things like that, it's a different logistic issue. So we have to understand that.
Let me just
Um,
let me just say, newsflash, as of this morning,
uh,
Sarah is helping schedule a meeting with, is it the president of Elegoo, the Chinese printer company? They
oh
want
wow.
to donate printers.
Are you
And
kidding?
so
Really?
that may, yeah, that may open up some possibilities. And
Mhm.
um, on Quan, if you would like to be in on that conversation, I think it would be
I
great.
would. Yeah, I
Yep.
would. That'd be interesting. Because I was when I was talking to Eamon O'Brien for the Tanzania project, he was kind of saying, "Are you going to be shipping it?" And I said, "No. The goal would be to send you a few, see what you like, and then eventually train you guys on the other side." Because their organization is pretty dialed in, and I thought they would actually be perfect. Because
Right.
John, you and I talked about this. In order to be successful, you have to lock in with a group that essentially is established and is on the ground and can tell you what they need. That's the only way you can do an international thing. There's no way I have time to fly to Tanzania and Uganda
Solve their
and
problems. That's right.
solve their problems. I'm not here to be the savior, right? I'm here to kind of help you figure out your own solutions, right?
Okay. All right. So that's
But that's
go
one.
ahead.
But then your question is, should we be on have a larger infrastructure for Enable? Should we restructure Enable or at least add on to the current structure and make it more centralized? Or at least certain parts more centralized. Is that what you're asking,
Yes.
or am I misinterpreting?
Well, uh, I'm interested in your thoughts about this, but we've experimented with centralization and we've experimented with decentralization, and yeah, they both have their challenges, but centralization means the whole thing can collapse, and then it takes, I can tell you, 4 or 5 years to build it back up. And the
Mhm.
decentralization is entirely appropriate for an international group of this sort. So here's just as a different model, though. Um, I imagine a decentralized floodplain,
Mhm.
okay? And it's got
Yeah,
a couple of drainage areas, right?
right.
One of those drainage areas is the portal through which volunteer activity and their products goes out to Uganda.
Mhm.
Another is a portal through which assistive technology coordination and solutions goes out,
Mhm.
perhaps through Virginia Tech, to people who need them there.
Right.
And it's still a decentralized organization, but you do
Mhm.
have some model structures which
Mhm.
can deal with opportunities to scale and
Mhm.
manage quality and collect feedback about what's actually happening to these devices once they leave the makers.
I see. So it's kind of what we're
And
doing now, but have it more like more activities like that.
yes, but before we do more activities like that, I would like
Yeah.
to stabilize. So this would be my answer, but I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it's the opportunity I'm currently sort of fascinated by.
Mhm.
Is if we could stabilize and model what you each are doing
Mhm.
and make it catchments for the e-NABLE community,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
that in itself would immediately be a way of amplifying the good work that you're doing without
Mhm.
fundamentally changing the good work that you're doing. But if we do it in some coordination and with some support, it could become a
Mhm.
model, perhaps.
Mhm.
First of all, it might solve many of the problems we have in America of
Mhm.
makers without outlets and
Mhm.
uh, failure to motivate people to see the beauty of assistive technology development.
Right.
And it might create a model that could then be built further. It's 1 o'clock. We don't have to solve that, but that's sort of the thing I see looming on the horizon of this conversation.
I can see why you're thinking about it. I mean, it's kind of what we're doing right now with the Uganda. Like we came to you, we talked to you about what we were doing, and you said, please become a chapter. So we became a chapter. And then
And
we
that didn't
started.
hurt, right?
No, 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 it didn't. It's just a couple emails. But
Uh-huh.
and then I think and then we started advertising on the forum on the hub to get more people interested, and that's worked. So I can see what you're saying.
Okay.
Um, there are things Virginia Tech can do to kind of do similar things, but it would mean that e-NABLE stops being just for arms.
e-NABLE has wanted e-NABLE. I have wanted e-NABLE to stop being just for arms
Yeah.
almost from day one, but certainly for the last few years, it seems to me that until recently was the obvious solution to all of the people who say, I've joined e-NABLE, I've got a 3D printer, I can't find people who need arms. Now there
Yeah.
are two solutions available, and you two
Right.
groups are modeling it. One is, well, we know 700 people who need arms, and another is, oh, but we know lots of people and lots of solutions, many of which do involve innovative design for assistive
Mhm.
technology.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm seeing. Now let me just say one other thing. Uh, I'm sharing my problems and my knowledge of e-NABLE's limitations. I really mean it when I say I don't want my knowledge of e-NABLE's limitations to slow down the good work you're doing. On the other hand, I think there's an opportunity for e-NABLE to potentially amplify the good work that you're doing. So I think that's where we pick up again.
Yeah, I think so. Let me chew on it.
Good.
But I think it is something. I mean, you certainly could. I mean, the power of the Naval Forum is that I mean, all of our non-Californian contacts have come through the forum, right? We have people who are interested. I think somebody told me he had 30 3D printers and he'd love to help.
Whoa,
Something
that's
crazy
great.
amount. Like he's got some 3D printing farm, and I think he has a YouTube channel of some kind. I won't say the name because I'll probably mess it up. Um, but uh, but yeah, and that just and I had no bandwidth to understand what was happening there because we were literally competing the following week. So I will have my
Okay.
students follow up on that. But that's what I'm saying. The e-NABLE forum has allowed for that, and so
Well, that's
Um,
great. So listen, we
yeah.
are about to go
Hmm.
to a weekly tempo
Hmm.
of e-NABLE town hall meetings.
No, I see.
They've been every other week. We're about to go weekly,
Hmm.
and we are on the verge, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, of normalizing on what day? Thursday at 11?
Yeah, I mean that hasn't really been finalized yet, but we'll see.
Okay. Um, I think you both of your groups, well, it would be worth my while to just try to continue these conversations week by week with you guys. I'll do it outside of a town hall meet, but frankly, I think this is what people who tune into the town hall meeting ought to be thinking about too. So let me just ask, would it be helpful to continue this conversation? I think today was very productive on a weekly basis. And is there a time of day, like, for example, Thursday at 11 Eastern, that would work for Anquan and maybe Galib, someone from Virginia Tech who understands these issues, as many of you as possible, but I mean, at least one?
Hmm.
Or is that too much for
Um,
right now?
no, it's okay. I'm trying to, for us, it might be simpler. Like 10 might be simpler because then over here it'll be 7 a.m. and then maybe some of my students could pop on for a little bit before they head off to school. Um, but is that too early? Is 10 a.m. too early for you guys or
No, no,
okay.
not for me.
I'd like to
Uh,
experiment with the 10 a.m. format, and that way, if it's an hour, then it's
all
doable
right.
because then students could get on if they needed to because they'd like to be part of the
Right.
conversation since they're
Well,
driving
Sarah
around.
has
But
the thankless task of
yeah.
trying to figure out what time will work for
Hmm.
various enable MVPs.
Hmm.
So we will add this to her challenge and get back to you on that, where we haven't settled it yet. Um, Virginia Techers, Anquan has sort of exposed his thinking about this conversation that we're having about what comes next. Do you have any thoughts to add?
Well, 10 a.m. Thursdays works for me. We can also have people come for that, but yeah, the Global Enable Coalition sounds really cool. Virginia Tech, we love to help with that as much as we can. We have the people needed for it. We have our own funding too, so yeah, it's amazing.
Interesting. Okay. And if I remember from our last conversation, you guys do also have organizational ambitions, right? I mean, what's interesting is that I think it was you, Galib. You sort of already have something like 40 Virginia Tech people who are interested in participating. And it's not just, as we've seen, it's not just about the geekery. It's also about, I don't want to say institution building, but it's also about project management and naming things so that people know what's going on, even if they're not directly a part of it. Okay, and you think you could participate on a recurring basis if we found a time slot that fit your schedule?
Yeah, that works. And also, when we've been talking about the Uganda project in our club, we've had a lot of student interest. So yeah, but yeah,
Okay.
we'd be able to meet the 10 a.m. Thursday time.
Okay. So, and let me suggest that's great. Let me suggest this because I think it fits with what Anquan is doing. The first step then would just be sort of develop a pipeline, whatever that means, as you've already begun doing, so that Virginia Tech becomes a feeder to Anquan's group and Uganda. The next step would be reversing it so that we had flows going from perhaps Anquan's group, other enable groups, and tying into your organizational activity. And at that point, we have two different models, but they're all, they're not isolated, invisible projects, which is the other enable syndrome that we have. This is wonderful work that I discovered late in the game. It's like, oh my God, it has been working, but no one told me. So this is great. We'll follow up on that. And on Quan, in the very near term, I'll get you involved in scheduling a meeting with the president of Elegoo.
Oh, okay, that'd be
But-
great. That'd be really great. Yeah.
Especially given yesterday's news where Trump says, we don't want to deal with Africa anymore. China, has been actively courting Africa.
Yeah.
And while I'm ambivalent about that, Africa deserves all the attention it can get. And we have an interesting proposition here.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are next steps. I just want to thank and congratulate all of you. Jonathan, you've been here and we haven't even heard a peep. Do you have anything to add?
Nothing that I can think of. I'd love to hear the organizational thoughts behind both groups, though, and I'm excited to see how it can come together and kind of form a next chapter potentially for e-NABLE, and help make people like me, as of a year or two ago, find that outlet to help with this, humanitarian desire to use technology to our advantage. So
There we go.
I hope
Okay.
something comes of it.
Great. And Sarah, thank you for bringing us together. You have passed the scheduling torch for Elegoo to me. Thanks a whole lot. But you're also going to try to pin down the meeting schedule. And that's all I know about for next steps. You guys, of course, are in no way to slow down your collaboration with me by trying to get me in the loop. That you just do. But now we have a mechanism for keeping posted on how that goes. Okay, thank you so much. It's quite exciting to me.
All right. Thanks, John.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
On Quan, sorry.
Yes, sir.
Because it's exciting to me, I sent you an email about this last week. I said, hey, town hall meeting, we ought to give this group $1,000 because they're raising money and we want to support what they're doing. We may invite you to another town hall meeting because that group is authorized to make micro grants of $1,000. And
Okay,
I
great.
think gearing up to a larger grant, possibly involving both of you, that will be a significant investment from the money that we have in the e-NABLE fund.
Oh,
We'll
that'd be
follow up
great.
on that. Okay,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
And Sarah, if you can call me at your earliest convenience, that would be great.
Okay.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
you.
Thank you.